Maeve Arabella McCrae paints what the world seldom sees, the raw, intimate truths hidden in every heartbeat. When her lost masterpiece surfaces in a gallery, she meets Emanuela Procopia, a woman whose admiration is as magnetic as it is transformative. Together, they navigate desire, devotion, and the brushstrokes that bind love and art into something breathtakingly alive. Brushstrokes of Desire. Where passion meets reverence, every brushstroke tells the story of desire. Chapter 1. Art in Small Hands. Maeve Arabella McCrae was a struggling painter. Her work never sold in big galleries, only to friends who wanted to support her, who believed in her even when the world didn't. That belief, however, didn't pay rent or silence the bills stacking up like quiet threats. So, she made a choice. School art teacher by day, painter by night. Maeve found a job at a local school, and it went well. She became the new arts and crafts teacher for the children of the wealthy. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep the lights on and a roof over her head. 3 days a week she taught. The rest of the time, she painted. "Miss May, can I use black in my painting?" Little Sarah's voice pulled Maeve back to the present. Maeve bent down to her level and smiled. "Of course, sweetheart," she whispered. "Remember, this is your art." Sarah beamed with pride and boldly added black to the canvas. Maeve straightened and looked around the room. Small fingers busy with paint, little brows furrowed in concentration. A warmth spread through her chest. She got to teach her passion. And maybe one day, maybe, she would exhibit again. Until then, she helped children like Sarah find their voices. The school wasn't a normal one. It was a center for autistic children, kids most schools didn't understand, didn't have the patience to listen to. Maeve moved between the rows of tiny easels, gently correcting Jimmy's grip. Sarah's giggle rang out again, and Maeve turned just in time to see her adding far too much black. But the excitement on the girl's face stopped her from intervening. Maeve glanced at the clock above the door. 4:26 p.m. 4 minutes until pickup. She walked to the front of the room and softly instructed them to pack away their paints and take the brushes to the sink at the back. Soon she would be alone again. Silence had become her constant companion. Her phone buzzed on the table. "Jessica, drinks tonight?" Maeve smiled softly and typed back. "Yeah. Same place?" The reply came quickly. "Yes. Just have a quick stop to make." Maeve stood at the door as the last child left with their parent. She returned to the classroom and rinsed the brushes clean. Tomorrow she'd be home. And Saturday. Saturday she was going to the new exhibition she'd been seeing all over social media. Chapter 2. Art Has Her Name. Saturday morning, Maeve dressed carefully. She knew the exhibition would be filled with high-class artists and serious buyers. She didn't want to stand out like a rusty nail in a polished wall. The drive into the city was long. Suburban houses gave way to concrete giants. The taxi stopped in front of the gallery, and Maeve stepped out, smoothing down her black cocktail dress as she looked up at the glass building. "Hope it's not pretentious," she muttered, climbing the steps. The glass doors opened. Only once she was inside did she notice the security guard holding them open. She thanked him with a small nod. The gallery smelled of turpentine and wax. She accepted a flute of champagne and drifted through the space. Paintings by unfamiliar artists lined the walls. She paused briefly at each one, then moved on. Soft murmurs floated through the room like background noise. Maeve tilted her head as she read the nameplates, trying to decipher what each artist was trying to say. "Jesus," she whispered to herself. "This is what they call art nowadays?" She scanned price tags, red dots marking sold pieces. Eventually, she wandered into a different section, one with portraits, more readable, more human. A silhouette of a naked woman stood bathed in light, as if inside a sunroom. "Provocative," Maeve murmured. "Nicely done." She moved along the wall unhurried. Then she turned a corner. And her heart stopped. Maeve froze. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor, the sound cracking through the gallery like a gunshot. "What the fuck?" she breathed, the words falling like a prayer. There, framed and lit with reverence, was her painting. The painting she had lost during the move. The painting she thought was gone forever. Her heart slammed into a blinding rhythm. Her knees buckled. The room tilted, darkened. "Miss? Can you hear me?" A woman's voice, distant. Maeve tried to sit up, but strong arms held her steady. "Easy," the voice coaxed. "Easy." Maeve's eyes focused first on the floor, then on hands gripping her arms. Long fingers. Elegant. She followed them upward. Hazel eyes met hers. Concern lived there, raw and unguarded. Maeve couldn't move. "God, she's gorgeous," her thoughts screamed. She shook her head, trying to stand again. "Take it slow." The voice was melodic. Lazy in the most dangerous way. A voice that would haunt Maeve's nights long after this moment. Chapter 3. Talent Gets Recognized. Maeve felt herself being guided to a bench and sank down onto it, heat flooding her cheeks. "Oh God, you must think." "Please," the woman interrupted gently. "Don't apologize. It happens." Maeve's pulse spiked again. She accepted the glass of water offered to her, gulped it down, and handed it back. The room had returned to its rhythm, guests murmuring, glasses clinking as if nothing had happened. She looked at the painting again. Her painting. She stood slowly. "That painting," she said, voice shaking. "How did it get here?" The woman rose beside her. "I believe the gallery bought it from the artist," she said brightly. "And I just bought it." Maeve stared. "I was asking the owner for the artist's details," the woman continued, oblivious. "I want more of their work." She smiled, conspiratorial. "I outbid a few people for it." Maeve turned slowly. "Outbid?" she whispered. "What do you mean?" The woman leaned in. "I bid 500,000 Canadian dollars. The world went quiet. 500,000 Canadian dollars. Maeve's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the painting. Back at the woman. Her lips moved uselessly. She stepped back once. Twice. Her legs hit the bench, and she collapsed onto it, trembling. The woman rushed forward again. "Are you okay? You look ill." Maeve shook her head faintly. That amount of money would change everything. Her name, her work, finally seen. She lifted her gaze to the woman crouched in front of her and simply stared. Then another voice cut in. "Is everything all right here, Miss Procopia?" The gallery owner. The woman stood, assuring him everything was fine. Maeve heard the conversation as if through water. "Barely present," she whispered. "It's mine." Emanuela Procopia stiffened. She turned back to Maeve. "What did you say?" Chapter 4. The Choice of Seeing. Emanuela studied Maeve in silence. Not the way collectors looked at artists, calculating, appraising, but like someone standing too close to a fire, aware of the heat and unwilling to step back. "You said it's yours," she said softly. "The painting." Maeve nodded once. Her throat felt tight, raw. "I painted it 3 years ago. I lost it during a move. I thought it was gone." Emanuela turned toward the canvas again. Her eyes traced the lines with new reverence. "The light," she murmured. "It's intentional. It falls the way memory does. Not where it should, but where it insists." Maeve looked up sharply. "That corner," Emanuela continued, pointing. "Most people would have finished it. Smoothed it out." "I didn't want to lie," Maeve said before she could stop herself. Emanuela's hand stilled. Slowly, she turned back. "May I ask you something?" she said. Maeve nodded. "If I hadn't told you what I paid," Emanuela said carefully, "would you have still claimed it?" Maeve hesitated. Then, "Yes." Something like a smile touched Emanuela's mouth. Not triumph. Recognition. "You can take it back," she said. "I won't fight you. Legally or otherwise." Maeve blinked. "But," Emanuela continued, voice lowering, "before you decide. Can I see the rest?" Maeve's heart thudded painfully. "I paint at home," she said. "It's not gallery ready." "That's precisely why I want to see it." Silence stretched between them. One painting. Or the possibility of being seen. Emanuela waited. Maeve noticed that first, the restraint. No pressure. No reaching. Just space. "You can take it back," Emanuela said again, steady. "The painting. I won't contest it." Maeve's fingers curled slowly at her sides. "And what happens if I do?" she asked. Emanuela didn't rush her answer. "Then I'll be disappointed. And respectful." Maeve let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "And if I don't?" Then I would like the opportunity to see more, Emanuela said. Not to rebrand you. Not to polish you into something palatable. To understand you. Maeve gave a quiet, humorless smile. Everyone says that. Emanuela met her gaze fully now. Everyone isn't willing to walk away empty-handed. That landed. Maeve turned toward the painting. Her painting. The woman in it stood unguarded, luminous, unashamed. Maeve had painted her before she learned to hide. I don't invite strangers into my work, Maeve said carefully. And I don't sign anything I don't understand. Good, Emanuela replied. Neither do I. Silence stretched dense, thoughtful. I'll show you 3, Maeve said finally. Not everything. Not yet. Emanuela's lips curved not in victory but appreciation. Then I'll earn the rest. Chapter 5, Proof in the Quiet. The gallery office was all glass and chrome, designed to intimidate without ever raising its voice. Maeve sat on the edge of a leather chair that cost more than her monthly rent, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Across from her, the gallery owner and a senior appraiser stood before the painting, their backs turned to her, murmuring in low professional tones. We'll need proof, the owner said at last, not unkindly. Provenance. Documentation. Something that ties the work to you beyond coincidence. Maeve nodded once. I understand. She stood, crossed the room slowly, and stopped just short of the canvas. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in the bottom left corner, she said quietly, just above the shadow line. The appraiser glanced at her. There's nothing there. Maeve's mouth curved faintly. Not unless you know where to look. She pointed, not touching, never touching. I always leave my initials, she continued. Not signed. Embedded. They're part of the composition, not an interruption of it. The room stilled. The appraiser stepped closer, adjusting the angle of the light. He crouched, squinting. Then he frowned. Bring the magnifier. Seconds stretched. Under the lens, beneath layers of paint and intention, the faintest shift in texture revealed itself. Not obvious. Not decorative. But once seen. Unmistakable. The appraiser murmured. He straightened slowly, looking at Maeve with new eyes. They're not painted over, he said. They're built into the underlayer, original to the work. The gallery owner exhaled sharply. There's no way someone could have added this later, the appraiser continued. It's integral. This painting belongs to her. Silence fell like a held breath. Emanuela, who had been standing apart, said nothing. But Maeve felt her gaze steady, intent, reverent. The gallery owner turned to Maeve. Ms. McCrae, he said carefully, we owe you an apology. Maeve inclined her head. Not triumphant. Just relieved. I never thought I'd need to prove it, she said softly. I didn't hide my name because I was ashamed. I hid it because the work mattered more than being seen. Emanuela's lips parted slightly at that. Something shifted. Not ownership. Not power. Recognition. And once a thing is truly seen, it can never be unseen. Chapter 6, When Power Speaks Softly. The gallery owner wasted no time. Given that this piece achieved the highest sale of the evening, he said smoothly, we will of course compensate you in full. The transaction will be corrected. Maeve nodded, absorbing the words without letting them dazzle her. And, he continued, already leaning forward, we'd like first option on your future work. An exclusive relationship. Representation. There it was. Clean. Efficient. Hungry. Maeve felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the sense of being cornered politely. Before she could respond, Emanuela spoke. No. The word was calm. Final. It cut through the room without effort. The gallery owner stiffened. Excuse me, Miss Procopia. I won't, Emanuela said evenly. This isn't how you approach an artist who has spent years unseen. She turned, not to the gallery, but to Maeve. You don't owe anyone immediacy, she said. Or exclusivity. Or gratitude. Maeve's pulse quickened. She hated that part of her wanted to lean toward that voice. Hated that another part already trusted it more than she should. Emanuela continued, carefully now. I have galleries in Athens, Thessaloniki, Toronto, Montreal. A pause. Spaces that protect artists instead of packaging them. The gallery owner scoffed lightly. With respect, this is a business. And with respect, Emanuela replied, eyes never leaving Maeve, so is legacy. Silence fell. Emanuela stepped closer, not invading, just present. I'm not asking to own your work, she said. Or to rush you. I'm offering assistance. Infrastructure. Time. Then, softer, and the right rooms. Maeve swallowed. And what do you get? She asked quietly. Emanuela didn't pretend this was altruism. I get to champion something real, she said. And to be associated with it. That's the exchange. Honest. Dangerous. Refreshing. The gallery owner cleared his throat. We need an answer, Ms. McCrae. Maeve looked at the painting once more. The woman in it stood unguarded, luminous. Brave in a way Maeve hadn't always allowed herself to be. Decision time. Again. She exhaled slowly. I'll accept payment for the painting, Maeve said. That's non-negotiable. Both parties nodded. But I won't sign exclusivity tonight, she continued. With anyone. The gallery owner frowned. Maeve turned to Emanuela. If I allow you to assist, she said carefully, it will be on my terms. No contracts until I've seen your spaces. No promises until trust exists. A beat. Emanuela smiled, not triumphant, not relieved. Respectful. Then we start with honesty, she said. And coffee. Not champagne. Maeve huffed a quiet laugh before she could stop herself. Maybe, this wasn't surrender. Maybe it was alignment. And that was far more dangerous. Chapter 7. What is not for sale? They didn't make a spectacle of it. No assistants. No driver waiting outside. Just Emanuela's car pulling up in front of Maeve's modest building, the city already dimming into evening. This is enough, Emanuela said when Maeve hesitated at the door. I don't need perfection. Maeve unlocked it anyway. Her apartment smelled faintly of oil paint and turpentine, comforting, lived in. Canvases leaned against walls, some wrapped, others bare. Sketches were taped to the fridge. Paint-stained rags lay folded like tired flags. Emanuela stepped inside and stopped. She didn't speak. She didn't touch. She looked. This, she said finally, is where the truth lives. Maeve crossed her arms instinctively. Most of it isn't finished. Emanuela turned to her. Good. Maeve hesitated, then moved first, lifting a canvas from behind the couch, setting it on the easel. A woman in shadow, jaw clenched, eyes defiant. Anger lived there. Unapologetic. Emanuela inhaled sharply. You didn't soften her. No, Maeve said. She didn't deserve it. Another painting. This one quieter. A body folded inward, light barely touching skin. This one was never meant for anyone, Maeve said. And yet, Emanuela replied softly, here she is. They moved through the room like that, no commentary, no valuation. Just presence. Each painting a confession. Each silence an agreement. At last, Emanuela turned to Maeve. You don't paint for approval, she said. You paint because something insists. Maeve met her gaze. That doesn't sell well. Emanuela smiled slightly. It sells forever. Maeve leaned back against the counter, heart thudding. If you work with me, Emanuela continued, I won't ask you to edit yourself. I won't ask for more palatable versions. A pause. But I will ask for courage. Maeve considered her. The wealth. The reach. The risk. And if I say no? Maeve asked. Then I'll still thank you, Emanuela said. For trusting me with this. Silence bloomed between them, thick, honest, alive. For the first time in a long while, Maeve felt it. Not fear. Possibility. Chapter 8. Where the work can breathe. They sat at Maeve's small kitchen table, 2 mugs between them going cold. Emanuela spread nothing out. No brochures. No floor plans. No glossy promises. I have galleries in places that move fast, she said instead. Where noise sells. Where names echo. Maeve didn't respond. And I have others, Emanuela continued, where people come to be quiet. That caught Maeve's attention. Tell me, Maeve said carefully. Not the reputation. The feeling. Emanuela leaned back, considering. Athens, she said. Stone walls. High ceilings. History pressing in on every piece. Your work would be read as myth. Powerful, but heavy. Maeve pictured it. The weight of expectation. the echo of centuries. She shook her head slightly. Toronto, Emanuela went on. Clean. White. Brilliant. Collectors everywhere. They'd want explanations. Labels. Context. I don't explain my work, Maeve said. I know, Emanuela replied softly. She paused then. Thessaloniki. Maeve waited. It's by the water, Emanuela said. Light changes every hour. The gallery is smaller. Intimate. People linger. They don't rush. They listen. Maeve closed her eyes briefly. And Canada? She asked. Montreal, Emanuela said. Old building. Brick and breath. A place where quiet things are respected. Maeve opened her eyes. Which would you choose, she asked, if this were your work? Emanuela didn't hesitate. Thessaloniki, she said. First. Let the work speak before the world shouts. Maeve studied her, searching for strategy, for leverage. She found none. I've never shown outside my country, Maeve said. Emanuela nodded. Then we don't make it big. We make it safe. Silence settled. Not awkward. Deciding. Maeve wrapped her hands around her mug. I don't want opening nights that feel like performances, she said. I don't want people touching me more than the art. Emanuela smiled, slow and understanding. Then Thessaloniki, she said. Small opening. Invitation only. No press until you say yes. Maeve exhaled. The choice wasn't about prestige. It was about trusting the room. Okay, Maeve said. But on one condition. Emanuela lifted a brow. I'm listening. I fly home alone, Maeve said. I don't owe anyone access just because they showed me theirs. Emanuela's smile widened, not offended. Impressed. Agreed, she said. Always. And just like that, the first door opened, not loudly, not dramatically, but wide enough for Maeve to walk through without leaving herself behind. Chapter 9. The Work Speaks. The calendar on Maeve's wall seemed impossibly far from reality. 1 month. 30 days until Thessaloniki. 30 days to make herself known, but only through the work she had always trusted. Maeve stood at her easel, brush poised, eyes narrowing at the blank canvas. Not blank, really empty in the wrong way. Waiting. Expecting. The kind of silence that almost demands honesty. She dipped the brush into paint and hesitated. Then the first line cut across the canvas, unapologetic, raw. Day after day, she painted. Some pieces whispered, gentle as a breath. Shadows curling around light, edges feathered. Others shouted in color, jagged, bold, unrelenting. A figure crouched in sorrow, another stretched in joy. A hand reaching, a body turning. Every piece alive. Maeve pulled back from a canvas she had finished, her eyes scanning every detail. A smile tugged at her lips. This one would speak without explanation. It would not be polite, it would not be silent. It would breathe. Emanuela visited occasionally. She never touched. She never directed. She simply watched. Her presence was steady, magnetic, patient. You're holding nothing back, Emanuela said one afternoon, watching Maeve swirl bold strokes across a canvas in crimson and gold. Maeve didn't respond immediately. She continued painting. Then, without turning, why would I? Emanuela's lips curved. Because the world often rewards compromise. Maeve laughed softly. The world doesn't pay rent on honesty. By the third week, Maeve had chosen which pieces would travel with her. Not the most polished. Not the most marketable. Only those that spoke, that breathed, that demanded to be seen on their own terms. Packing began. Canvases wrapped carefully, sent off with instructions only Maeve would understand. The work would arrive in Thessaloniki, ready to breathe, ready to challenge, ready to live. At night, Maeve stood in her empty studio, the scent of paint still in the air, and let herself imagine the gallery walls. Each piece in its place, visitors moving slowly from one to the next, seeing, feeling, recognizing. The thought made her pulse quicken. Not with fear. Not with vanity. But with a quiet, steady pride. Emanuela had told her she would be present, quietly, behind the scenes. Not to take, not to own, only to ensure the work was seen as it deserved. And Maeve trusted just enough to let that happen. The month passed in a blur of color and motion, Nights spent staring at half-finished canvases, mornings starting before the sun with brushes and coffee. Every piece completed was a piece of herself entrusted to the world, fearless, intimate, alive. And when the final crate was sealed, labeled, and ready for transport, Maeve finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She had done it. She had made work that mattered. Work that spoke. And she had chosen who would witness it. That alone made the journey worth it. Chapter 10. Across Skies and Silence. The taxi wound through the city streets before dawn, headlights catching the pale gleam of snow on the curb. Maeve's luggage sat carefully beside her, each crate packed with pieces of herself, wrapped in bubble wrap and blankets, labeled in precise order. She kept her hands folded in her lap, trying not to imagine the walls of Thessaloniki awaiting her paintings. "You travel lightly," Emanuela remarked from the passenger seat. Her voice, low and even, brushed across the quiet of the cab. Maeve glanced at her, caught in the soft gold of the dashboard lights. "I travel with what matters," she replied. A statement, not an invitation. Emanuela's eyes held hers for a fraction longer than necessary. Something like approval or curiosity. It made Maeve's pulse skip. Subtle, quiet, and entirely unclaimed. The airport was hushed, just opening to the first flights. Emanuela helped with check-in only minimally, her hands brushing Maeve's for a moment over a boarding pass. Maeve noticed. She noticed everything and nothing, all at once. On board, Maeve settled into her seat by the window, the plane still smelling of fresh plastic and the hum of engines waiting to wake. Emanuela slipped into the aisle seat beside her, smooth, deliberate. No invitation to conversation. No closeness beyond necessity. Yet her presence filled the space, grounding it, challenging it. Maeve stared out at the city shrinking below, lights flickering like distant stars. "I'm not usually nervous," she said quietly. "You're not usually far from what you control," Emanuela said. Her voice was soft, melodic, a whisper that Maeve could only hear because the world outside had paused. Maeve turned her gaze briefly, curious, then back to the city. The hum between them stretched slight, almost invisible, but charged. A spark neither could name, existing in shared silence, in proximity, in restraint. Hours passed with only the faint clatter of service carts and the soft sigh of air conditioning. Maeve worked her sketches, making adjustments to ideas for new pieces she would display, while Emanuela observed, never intruding. Her occasional glance, subtle, measured, lingered just long enough to keep Maeve aware of her presence. When the sun rose over the Mediterranean, the plane banked gently, revealing Thessaloniki below, red-tiled roofs, a ribbon of coastline, and the gleam of water catching the morning light. Maeve felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but expectation. Emanuela leaned slightly, a hair's breadth, to point toward the city's harbor. "That's the gallery district. Quiet streets. Stone and light. It's waiting for your work," she said. Maeve allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The gallery would be intimate. The walls would breathe with her art. And here, beside her, sat someone who had insisted on authenticity, not spectacle. The plane touched down. Engines hummed as they rolled to a stop. Maeve felt the first ripple of excitement, tempered, controlled, hers entirely. She stood, gathered her belongings, and allowed herself a final glance at Emanuela. No words. Just recognition. And maybe, that subtle spark, that quiet electricity, was the only thing that could match the pulse of her art. Chapter 11. Crates, Canvas, and Quiet Temptation. The gallery door opened onto pale stone floors and high ceilings. Light from the early afternoon sun poured through tall windows, brushing across the walls in a soft gold. Maeve inhaled slowly, letting it fill her lungs. This was the space her work would inhabit. This was the world she had painted toward. Emanuela followed, quiet, measured. She didn't rush, didn't instruct, just existed in the same rhythm as Maeve. The crates had arrived, lined neatly against the wall, waiting. Maeve knelt beside the first one. She ran her hands along the edges, feeling the weight of her own creation, wrapped and silent. Every piece had a heartbeat, and she could feel it pulse through the crate. "Shall we?" Emanuela asked softly. No pressure, no hurry, just presence. Maeve nodded and carefully lifted the first canvas, peeling away the wrapping. She set it gently on the easel. The colors seemed to sigh, stretching into the light. Maeve stepped back, hands lingering at her sides, and let herself admire, not for sale, not for judgment, but because it was hers. Emanuela moved closer, slowly, and Maeve caught herself watching her hands. Long fingers, deliberate, careful. Strong but gentle. They hovered near the canvas, as if afraid to disturb the soul of it. Maeve's breath caught. She imagined, just for a flicker of a second, what it would feel like if those same hands traced her skin instead of the paint. She shook the thought away and focused on the next crate. Canvas after canvas, she unpacked. Some were loud and raw, screaming in color. Others whispered, delicate, intimate, almost secret. Each one she placed with care, giving it space to breathe, to speak. Emanuela followed, never touching, only observing. She lingered at a particular painting, a woman twisting in shadow and light, and Maeve's pulse skipped. The intensity in Emanuela's eyes was quiet but undeniable, and Maeve felt it like a hand on her own spine. A brush of fingers, just close enough to imagine. A tilt of her head. Maeve could feel herself leaning into the thought, into the tension. She turned, deliberately, as if to remind herself that the gallery, the crates, and the paintings were all that mattered here. And yet, every time Emanuela adjusted a canvas or shifted a crate, Maeve's gaze found those hands again. Long, precise, capable. She felt the pull of them in a way that had nothing to do with art, nothing to do with her work. A slow, quiet spark, buried beneath professional respect but undeniable, simmering under her skin. Hours passed, each crate unpacked, each painting hung with deliberate care. When the last one was placed, Maeve stepped back and surveyed the room. Every canvas alive, every piece hers. And somewhere between the lines of paint and the spaces in between, Emanuela's presence lingered like a shadow she could not ignore. They stood there in silence, breathing the same air, watching the walls they had brought to life. Maeve's heart thrummed, not from pride, not from exhibition, but from proximity. The subtle, dangerous electricity of someone who saw you completely and respectfully, and yet left your skin aching to wonder how it might feel if they didn't. Emanuela's gaze met hers briefly. Just long enough. Maeve felt the brush of intention, and her own breath caught. Art, she realized, was not the only thing alive in the room. Chapter 12, Private Walkthrough. The gallery was still. No chatter, no glasses clinking, no footsteps, but their own. The crates had been unpacked, each painting positioned with care, each canvas allowed its own space to breathe. Maeve led the way, her steps soft on the polished stone floor. Emanuela followed, close enough that her presence warmed the air, but careful. She didn't touch, didn't crowd, she simply observed. Maeve stopped before the first piece, a figure twisting in muted shadows, tension in every line. She had painted it in one breathless night, letting everything she felt spill onto the canvas. Emanuela exhaled, a whisper of sound that might have been unnoticed. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Her voice was low, reverent, almost afraid to disturb the space between them. Maeve's hands tightened slightly at her sides. She knew that feeling exposure, baring herself in a way that felt too intimate to share. It whispers into your soul, Maeve said softly, though more to herself than to Emanuela. It wants to be seen. Emanuela moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step risked breaking a spell. Her gaze lingered on every piece, the brush strokes, the unpolished edges, the boldness, the quiet. Her eyes glimmered, reflecting the colors, the emotions raw and unfiltered. This, Emanuela said finally, voice trembling almost imperceptibly. This is more than art. It's life. Maeve's throat tightened. She hadn't thought anyone could see her work this way, completely, without judgment, without expectation. Yet here was Emanuela, awestruck, almost fragile in her reverence. I could keep it all, Emanuela whispered. It's tempting. Maeve's eyes met hers, soft but firm. Emanuela continued softly, and I almost wish I could, she admitted, a flicker of vulnerability in her tone. But the world deserves this. Your voice, it deserves to be heard. Maeve turned, watching the way Emanuela's hands hovered just above the canvases, careful, gentle. She imagined faintly, impossibly, how those same hands might feel against her own skin, tracing without touching, knowing without needing permission. She shook the thought away and returned to the present, letting the gallery walls hold them both. Emanuela paused before a quiet, intimate piece, one Maeve had barely finished, one she had almost considered keeping hidden forever. The woman in the painting twisted in vulnerability and strength, and Emanuela's lips parted slightly, breath-catching. "I've never," she began, but stopped, unable to find words worthy of the moment. Maeve stepped closer, careful, almost protective. "You don't have to," she said. "Just feel it." Emanuela did. She let herself fully. And in that silence, filled only with color and shadow, with light and breath, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, a respect, a spark that neither could name aloud yet. The private walkthrough ended, but the reverence lingered. Maeve realized she almost didn't want to show it to the world, not because she was selfish, but because what they had seen together felt sacred. But she knew she couldn't keep it locked away forever. Authenticity had to be shared, even when it hurt, even when it left her exposed. She took a slow breath and turned to Emanuela. "Will you still help me?" she asked. Emanuela's smile was quiet, sure, a tether in the vastness of the gallery. "Always. I wouldn't miss this for anything." Chapter 13. The Night She Painted in Presence. The gallery shimmered under soft lighting. Guests murmured politely, champagne flutes clinking lightly as they moved from canvas to canvas. But Maeve barely noticed them. Her attention was singular, concentrated, a slow burn under the surface of the crowd. She had dressed carefully, a sleek, deep emerald gown that traced her form but left space for restraint. Hair swept back, eyes lined just so. Tonight, she was not hiding, but she was not inviting. Not for the world. Not yet. Her pulse quickened when Emanuela arrived, quiet as ever, but commanding even in subtlety. She wore black, simple, elegant, but something about the way she carried herself made Maeve's chest tighten. Emanuela's eyes lingered on her for a long, charged moment. Not appraisal, not judgment, just attention. Maeve's throat went dry. "You look perfect," Emanuela murmured. Not to anyone else. To Maeve. Just enough that Maeve felt it as a pulse against her ribs. Maeve gave a small smile. "For the work," she said, brushing past the compliment, letting distance keep the tension taut. Yet every step she took was measured, deliberate, meant to draw Emanuela's gaze without offering more than she chose to give. The guests moved around them, polite and oblivious, but the gallery itself seemed to vibrate with her presence. Her paintings hung as if breathing, alive, daring anyone to see them fully, and some did, whispering, nodding, captivated. Emanuela stayed close, patient, silent, letting Maeve move through her own world. But when she paused before a particularly intimate piece, a figure twisting in a half-shadow, Emanuela's hand brushed lightly against the frame. It was accidental. Or maybe it wasn't. Maeve's breath hitched. She looked at Emanuela, eyes wide, pulse rising in quiet awareness of every line, every movement. "You've done it," Emanuela said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the gallery hum. "You've made them speak for themselves. And yet, this room," she gestured subtly, encompassing the walls, the light, the air between them, "has never felt so alive." Maeve's lips curved. "It's not just the art," she said, voice low, measured. "It's who's here to see it." Emanuela's eyes met hers. The subtlest spark passed, electric, unspoken, but undeniable. Maeve could feel it like a brush of fingertips across her skin, just enough to ignite awareness, not possession. Guests murmured, moved, admired, but Maeve was conscious of only one presence. She drifted from canvas to canvas, careful, intimate, showing her work to the world, but always returning, in silent acknowledgement, to Emanuela. At one point, Emanuela leaned closer, whispering as if the world had disappeared, "You've captured them, captured me." Maeve's breath caught. She dared a fleeting glance down at the hand that had nearly brushed the canvas earlier, long fingers, precise, capable. How would they feel if traced along her skin, along the curves the gown left hinted and revealed? The thought struck her, daring, impossible, thrilling. She shook herself slightly, returning her attention to the room, the paintings, the subtle admiration of the other guests. Yet every movement she made, every measured smile, every careful step, was for Emanuela too. The audience might be many, but the connection, the spark, the pull, was singular. When the night drew to a close, Maeve finally allowed herself to exhale, leaning slightly against a pedestal, surveying the gallery, the lights, the walls alive with her work. Emanuela approached, close enough now that the air between them was almost heat, almost confession. "You've shared yourself tonight," Emanuela murmured, hand brushing Maeve's sleeve, fleeting but deliberate. "And yet, I feel there's more you're keeping for yourself." Maeve smiled, a slow, knowing smile. There always is. And in that quiet, intimate understanding, the gallery, her work, her presence, the art, and the woman who had claimed her attention, held its own breath. The night was unforgettable, not for applause, not for acclaim, but for what simmered silently between them. Chapter 14. After the applause. The last guest had departed. The gallery, once alive with murmurs and champagne clinks, now held only the soft echo of footsteps and the hum of the heating system. Maeve lingered by a central canvas, brushing a fingertip lightly along the edge, not touching the painted surface, only feeling the rhythm of it through the frame. The adrenaline of the night still pulsed through her, her chest rising and falling in quiet waves. Emanuela appeared silently beside her, a shadow against the warm light. She didn't speak at first, just let herself take in the room, the canvases, the muted colors, the whispers of brushstrokes, and the presence of the artist herself. "You," Emanuela began, voice low, almost reverent. She drew in a slow breath. "I've never seen work like this. Not in person. Not like this. You've made it live. Every piece." Maeve's lips curved into a small, almost shy smile. "Thank you," she murmured. She looked away, but not before catching Emanuela's gaze lingering, absorbed, open, almost worshipful in its intensity. Emanuela's eyes moved from canvas to canvas, drinking in every detail, the raw emotion, the intimacy Maeve had bled onto each frame. Her hand hovered for the briefest moment near a painting, hesitant to touch, reverent, as if afraid that her presence might somehow steal the soul from it. Emanuela whispered, faltering, "I almost don't want the world to see it. To keep it all for myself." Her voice was trembling, more from awe than desire. "But then I realize it has to be shared. You deserve that. Every ounce of recognition." Maeve swallowed. "It's not just the recognition," she said softly. "It's letting someone see it the way it is, and hoping they understand. That's the terrifying part." Emanuela's gaze shifted from the painting back to Maeve. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped closer, and Maeve felt the air between them thicken. Closeness without contact, proximity without crossing lines, but every inch of that space screamed tension. Her eyes drifted to Maeve's hands, still faintly stained with paint. "These hands," she said quietly, almost to herself, "made all of this. Every one of these pieces." Maeve's breath caught. She imagined those same hands, long, precise, careful on her own skin. Just a thought, fleeting and dangerous, but enough to make her pulse spike. She shook it away, returning her attention to the canvases, yet her gaze kept flicking to Emanuela. "Your Maeve said finally, voice low, teasing the edge of confession, "isn't subtle." Emanuela smiled faintly, hesitant, vulnerable in a way Maeve hadn't seen before. "Perhaps not," she admitted. "But it's honest. And I want to hold on to that honesty." Maeve felt the weight of the words, the intention behind them. She nodded slowly, careful, deliberate. "Then keep it," she whispered. "But don't expect me to make it easy." And in the quiet of the gallery, surrounded by her life's work, Maeve felt something she hadn't felt before, a tether forming, not of ownership, not of demand, but of mutual understanding. A spark that didn't need flames to burn. Emanuela lingered a heartbeat longer, her gaze tracing the lines of Maeve's face, the posture of her shoulders, the way she held herself. Reverence, yes, but something else simmered beneath it, desire restrained, fascination tethered to awe. Maeve, catching the subtle change, allowed herself a small, private thrill. The night belonged to her. The art belonged to the world. But this moment, this closeness, this silent acknowledgement, it belonged only to them. Chapter 15. In Between the Light and Shadow. The gallery had emptied, the applause and murmurs of the night now nothing more than echoes in Maeve's mind. She returned to her studio, the one space that belonged entirely to her, where brushes, paints, and canvases waited like old friends. Orders had poured in overnight. Every painting she had unveiled at the opening had been claimed, sold, shipped, spoken for. Collectors, curators, enthusiasts, all wanting more. Maeve smiled faintly, a quiet, private smile. Success tasted sweet, but it wasn't the part she craved. It was the painting she hadn't shown anyone, the one she kept hidden, tucked behind a canvas in the corner of her studio. It was raw, unfiltered, dangerous in its honesty. For days, she painted, letting the world and its expectations wait. She created new pieces, carefully curated, bold but approachable, knowing they would sell, knowing they would please, but always returning, at the end of the day, to the one that demanded everything from her. It was larger than the others, a swirl of shadow and light, intimacy and restraint, longing and fear. Every brushstroke was deliberate, every color a heartbeat, every line a confession Maeve couldn't voice aloud. She worked late into the night, the city outside quiet, the studio filled only with the scent of oil paint and turpentine. Sometimes she paused, stepping back to watch the piece breathe. It felt alive, like it might reach for her if she looked away for too long. Emanuela called once during this period, polite and careful. "Your patrons are waiting," she reminded gently. "They want more of you." Maeve smiled softly, almost secretively. "I give them what I can. The rest is mine to keep for now." The thrill of possession was sweet, not just of the painting, but of the control she maintained over it. In a world that wanted to consume her work, she allowed herself one piece untouched by expectation, one confession that belonged solely to her. At night, when she paused to rest, Maeve found herself imagining Emanuela's presence beside her in the studio. Not watching, not directing, simply being. She imagined the way Emanuela's hands might brush over a canvas, so careful, so deliberate, and a flutter rose in her chest at the thought of how they might feel on her own skin. Dangerous. Forbidden. Yet quietly exhilarating. The hidden painting became an obsession, a tether to herself, a reminder that some truths were meant to be revealed only when the time was right. And Maeve, patient as she was stubborn, knew that day would come, but not yet. For now, the world could wait. For now, she painted in silence, letting the piece speak to her alone, alive in her hands, waiting for the one person she might someday trust enough to see it. Chapter 16. The Quiet Before Revelation. The new paintings line the walls of Maeve's studio like silent sentinels, each one alive with color, emotion, and intent. Bold, raw, approachable, every piece ready for the scrutiny of critics and the eyes of collectors. Yet among them, one remained veiled, a secret under a heavy cloth in the corner of the room. Maeve moved among the canvases, brushing her hands lightly over the frames. She inspected each piece, making subtle adjustments, leaning in to trace a line or tilt a frame just so. They were ready. The upcoming show would be a triumph. She could feel it in the rhythm of her pulse, the quiet hum of energy that lingered in her bones. And yet, the hidden painting called to her, silent but insistent. She avoided it deliberately, leaving the cloth draped just so, its contours hinting at the intensity beneath. She had finished it weeks ago, pouring every secret, every fear, every ache of her heart into its lines and colors. To reveal it too soon would be to give herself away. She walked past it again, pausing, imagining Emanuela standing there. The thought made her chest tighten. How would Emanuela react, seeing it at last? Would she understand the audacity, the intimacy, the rawness? Or would it terrify her, like it sometimes terrified Maeve herself? The rest of the world could wait. Critics, buyers, fans, they would see the new collection, and they would marvel. But this one piece, her soul in paint, was hers to keep for now. As night fell and the city lights shimmered outside her window, Maeve sat before her easel, not touching the hidden painting, not yet. She poured herself into small sketches, experiments, exercises of light and shadow, every stroke a whisper of what she had held back. The cloth remained untouched, the secret alive and waiting, a tension that hummed in the quiet studio like a heartbeat. And somewhere deep inside, Maeve knew that when the time came, she would reveal it. To Emanuela first. To no one else. For now, it was enough to let it breathe in its mystery, to let her anticipation sharpen and hold her steady. The hidden painting was not just art, it was trust, longing, and a promise she alone would keep until the perfect moment arrived. Chapter 17. An Invitation in Shadows. The crates had been shipped. The galleries in Greece, in Canada, in cities Maeve had only ever dreamed of, now displayed her work. Collectors admired, critics praised, and buyers clamored. She had given the world her art, and it had been received with awe. But the studio in Thessaloniki was quiet once more, a sanctuary of light and shadow, paint and possibility. And in that quiet, Maeve's phone buzzed. A message. Simple, elegant, no need for flourish. Come see the next phase. Let's make Thessaloniki your home. She paused, staring at the words. Emanuela. Always precise, always commanding, yet always careful. Not a demand, not a plea, an invitation wrapped in certainty. The kind of message that made Maeve's chest tighten and her mind whirl, imagining what living there would mean, and what being near Emanuela might bring. A week later, Maeve arrived in Thessaloniki, luggage light but heart heavier. Emanuela met her at the gallery doors, her presence calm, assured, magnetic. The city hummed around them, but here, in this space, there was only the pulse of possibility. Welcome home, Emanuela said softly, her hands briefly brushing Maeve's at the door. It was fleeting, polite, almost casual, but it left Maeve's skin tingling. Maeve smiled, feeling the subtle weight of the invitation. It feels different, she admitted. Not just the city, not just the gallery, but the way Emanuela's eyes seemed to see everything she had ever hidden. That's the point, Emanuela replied, a slow smile curving her lips. I want you to paint. I want the city to breathe with your work. And, her voice softened, but her meaning was clear. I want you close. To witness it, to create it, to live it. Maeve's pulse quickened. Not for the offer of space, or for the galleries, or even for the success she'd finally claimed. No, this was different. This was proximity to someone who made her breath catch with intention, who made the city, the studio, even the act of painting, feel like it might contain sparks she couldn't name aloud. She nodded slowly. Then I'll stay. Thessaloniki can be home for the art, and for the rest, I suppose. Emanuela's smile deepened, just the faintest arch of lips and eyes, private and intimate, like a secret shared in the half-light. Good, she murmured. I'll be here. Watching. Learning. Maybe inspiring. And in that statement, Maeve realized that the real gift wasn't the galleries, the acclaim, or the success. It was this, proximity to a woman who saw her completely, who made her want to create, and who allowed her to remain herself, even as she drew her ever closer. The crates might be gone. The world might have her paintings. But Thessaloniki, the studio, and Emanuela, those would remain hers to navigate, to explore, and perhaps, in time, to surrender to just enough. Chapter 18. Revealed in Color. The envelope of the night was soft, scented with sea breeze and distant city lights. Maeve's hands trembled slightly as she carried the carefully wrapped painting up the steps to Emanuela's private residence. The streets of Thessaloniki were quiet, almost reverent, as if they too sensed the weight of what was about to be unveiled. When the door opened, Emanuela stood there, elegantly poised, curiosity flickering across her eyes at the sight of the crate Maeve carried. I brought something for you, Maeve said softly, voice low, intimate. She set the crate down with careful precision, almost afraid to make too much noise. Emanuela's gaze lingered on Maeve's hands, on the tension in her shoulders, on the way she seemed simultaneously cautious and daring. I've been waiting, she admitted, a whisper almost lost to the night air. Maeve knelt slightly, undoing the wrappings, careful not to reveal too much too soon. The cloth fell away, and there it was. Emanuela's breath caught. The painting shimmered in the soft lamplight of the foyer, rich, layered, intimate. Maeve had captured her in a way that felt raw and true. Not just her form, not just her face, but the essence, the quiet strength, the subtle vulnerability, the allure she herself hadn't realized she carried. You've seen me, Emanuela whispered, almost disbelieving. Her eyes roamed the canvas as though seeing herself for the first time, stripped of pretense, exalted in color and shadow. Maeve's voice was barely audible. I see you, she said. The way you move, the way you breathe. The way the world bends around you and you don't even notice. I wanted you to see yourself through my eyes. Emanuela's hand lifted slowly, hesitating in the air, as if reaching for the painting itself, but not yet touching. Her pulse was quick, her eyes shimmering with a rare vulnerability. I've never been seen like this, she admitted, voice catching. Not truly. Not this way. Maeve rose slightly, keeping a careful distance, but close enough that the heat of her presence brushed Emanuela's. You don't have to say anything. Just feel it. And she did. Emanuela felt it, every stroke, every color, every intimate whisper of intent. She felt herself, how Maeve perceived her, how she moved through the world, how she captivated without ever trying. And the revelation made her pulse thunder in her ears, a heady, dangerous rhythm. Her eyes lifted to Maeve, wide, luminous, almost tremulous. You've given me something I didn't know I needed, she breathed. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame, hesitant, reverent, almost afraid to cross the boundary. Maeve's eyes followed the motion. She imagined those hands on her skin, soft and deliberate, tracing, claiming, exploring, not the painting, but her. The thought made her chest tighten, her breath quicken. She stepped closer, careful, daring to bridge the invisible distance. You've always known, Emanuela whispered, voice low, almost a prayer. Even in the smallest ways. Maeve's lips curved, slow, private, full of intent. I have, she murmured. And now, you see it. The painting hung between them, a bridge of color, of vulnerability, of truth. But the tension was electric, charged, alive, the space between them no longer empty, no longer just professional, no longer just art. In that moment, the world beyond the doorway ceased to exist. The city, the galleries, the collectors, they all fell away. There was only the painting, the truth within it, and the slow, inexorable pull of two hearts learning what it meant to be seen. Chapter 19, Seen as She Is. Emanuela stood frozen before the painting, the edges of the frame catching the soft lamplight, the colors vibrating with the intensity of Maeve's gaze. Each brushstroke whispered a truth she hadn't dared to voice, each shadow and highlight mapping something she had never shown anyone. It wasn't her power. It wasn't the wealth, the galleries, the acclaim. Those were only the surface, glittering and ephemeral. Maeve had seen beyond that into the quiet corners, the lines of tension she thought she hid, the moments of vulnerability beneath the armor. And in that seeing, Emanuela felt herself, truly herself, for the first time. Not the persona the world demanded she be. Not the polished, unflinching figure everyone revered. Just her. Her chest tightened. Her breath caught. Every brushstroke Maeve had laid on the canvas, every curve, every detail, screamed intimacy. This was how Maeve saw her. And slowly, impossibly, Emanuela realized she had felt it too. Since the first moment they met, every glance, every small interaction, every near brush of touch had carried the same pulse, the same current. The memory of that first gallery encounter flashed in her mind, the way Maeve had frozen in front of her painting, the flutter of awe and disbelief in her eyes, the quiet heat beneath it, unspoken but undeniable. And now it was crystal. That same feeling had never wavered. Emanuela swallowed hard. So, you've always... Her voice trembled slightly, not finishing the sentence because it didn't need to be said. She didn't have to. The canvas between them spoke every confession Maeve had never voiced aloud. Maeve's gaze lifted from the painting, meeting hers, careful, deliberate, intimate. The studio felt smaller, warmer, charged with the quiet rhythm of recognition. Maeve's eyes held her steady, unapologetic, and entirely, achingly honest. I've always felt it, Maeve said softly, a whisper that brushed against the edges of the space between them. Since the first moment. You've always been impossible to ignore. Emanuela's lips parted, and she felt the heat of that truth settle deep in her chest. Impossible to ignore. Uncontrollable. Magnetic. And now undeniable, because here it was laid bare on canvas, on the floor, in the air between them. She stepped closer, not too close, careful, almost reverent, and for the first time allowed herself to fully see Maeve. Not as an artist, not as a prodigy or a rising star, but as the woman who had held her in quiet off from the very beginning. A slow, shivering understanding passed between them, a shared recognition that neither had fully dared to voice. And in that pause, in that private intimacy, Emanuela finally understood. What she felt, what Maeve felt, had been the same from the start. And it was real. Chapter 20. The First Contact. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city beyond the window. Paint-scented air clung to the walls, carrying with it the weight of secrets, brushstrokes, and unspoken confessions. Maeve stood a few feet away from Emanuela, the hidden painting between them like a silent witness, the colors glowing softly in the lamplight. Their gazes met, and in that stillness, time itself seemed to pause. Every unspoken thought, every long-held glance, every quiet spark of desire hung in the air like electric dust. Emanuela's hand lifted slowly, deliberate, as if performing a ritual she had longed to enact but had never dared. Her fingers hovered just short of Maeve's arm, the distance charged, sacred. Maeve's breath caught. She did not step back. Instead, she mirrored the movement, reaching toward Emanuela, letting her hand hover inches from the others, fingers trembling slightly, the air between them humming with anticipation. "May I?" Emanuela whispered, the single question carrying a world of consent, a careful invocation. Maeve's lips curved in a soft, private smile. "Yes," she breathed. The moment their hands met, it was electric, almost ceremonial, fingers entwining slowly, deliberately, like a promise without words. Their palms pressed together, warmth spreading, heartbeats sinking, eyes locked in a silent exchange of everything they had never dared to say aloud. Step by step, inch by inch, the space between them dissolved. Emanuela's other hand lifted, brushing a strand of hair from Maeve's face, lingering at the jawline, hesitant, reverent. Maeve leaned in slightly, mirroring the intention, her pulse thundering in her ears. And then, impossibly, naturally, they closed the distance. Lips met, soft at first, tentative, a kiss that was both offering and claiming, curiosity and confession. Slow, ritualistic, deliberate, as if they were learning each other's rhythm for the first time, exploring, savoring. Emanuela's hands framed Maeve's face gently, fingers tracing the planes, memorizing the contours as if they were as vital as the brushstrokes in her own hidden painting. Maeve's hands slid to Emanuela's waist, anchoring herself, leaning into the heat, into the certainty, into the shared surrender. Time fractured. There was no city, no galleries, no patrons, no applause, only the soft press of lips, the hum of heartbeat, the electric charge of recognition made flesh. When they finally parted, just enough to breathe, their foreheads touched, eyes closed, and Maeve whispered, "I've wanted that, since the first moment." Emanuela's lips curved into the faintest smile, her voice low, reverent. "As have I." And in that quiet, sacred room, amid the colors, the canvases, and the life Maeve had poured into paint, two hearts finally met where words could not reach. The kiss was not the end, it was the beginning. Chapter 21. Reverence in the Quiet. The studio was dimly lit, the soft glow of lamps casting pools of amber across canvases that bore witness to their journey. Maeve stood before her easel, brush poised in hand, but her attention kept straying to Emanuela, who leaned against a pillar, quiet and still, eyes tracing her every movement. Maeve felt the familiar pull, the quiet spark of recognition that had existed since their first meeting, now deepened by proximity and trust. She dipped the brush in pigment, but her strokes were slower, more deliberate, almost ceremonial. Each mark was a whisper, an offering. Emanuela stepped closer, careful, respectful, letting the distance shrink at Maeve's pace. Her fingers brushed against Maeve's shoulder in passing, a fleeting, electric touch, and Maeve's breath caught. No words were needed. The air between them hummed with shared understanding. "I could watch you paint forever," Emanuela murmured, voice soft, reverent. Her hands hovered over the edge of the easel, almost afraid to disturb the rhythm of Maeve's creation. Maeve smiled without looking away from the canvas. "Then don't blink," she whispered, the curve of her lips teasing, almost playful, though her heart raced with quiet intensity. Emanuela reached slowly, as if performing a ritual, brushing a strand of hair from Maeve's neck. Her fingertips lingered, tracing the line of her jaw, the delicate curve of her shoulder, memorizing, revering. Maeve tilted her head slightly, offering just enough, inviting without demanding. Their movements became a language of their own, hands brushing, fingers grazing, lingering touches that were neither rushed nor casual. Each contact was a conversation, a reverent acknowledgement of desire and trust. Maeve set the brush down, letting her fingers rest lightly on Emanuela's hand. The warmth was grounding, intimate, and electric all at once. "You feel different," Maeve breathed. "Close but safe." Emanuela smiled faintly, her eyes soft, unwavering. "I've always wanted this. Us," she admitted, the words almost a prayer. "To be near you, to see you too." Maeve silenced her with a slow, deliberate touch to her lips, leaning in just enough to let their foreheads rest together. The heat of her breath mingled with Emanuela's, and in that simple, sacred closeness, the world outside ceased to exist. They spent hours like this, exploring intimacy not with urgency but with reverence, hands tracing the curve of a shoulder, the line of a collarbone, fingers brushing against palms in silent recognition. Every contact was deliberate, every glance intentional. The kisses were slower now, softer, exploratory, lingering in the spaces between them rather than claiming them outright. Maeve's hands eventually returned to the canvas, guided by the faint warmth of Emanuela's presence behind her. The paint seemed to respond, flowing more freely, more vividly, alive with the electricity of shared desire. And Emanuela, quietly observing, felt herself being drawn in, caught between awe, admiration, and something deeper, more primal. In that studio, among the colors, the shadows, and the unspoken words, their intimacy became a ritual, a slow, sacred dance of touch, trust, and longing. No need for rush. No need for confession beyond what their bodies already knew. For Maeve and Emanuela, intimacy was not about possession. It was about reverence, reverence for each other, for the art that had brought them together, and for the quiet, electric connection that refused to be named but refused to be denied. Chapter 22. The Crescendo. The studio was quiet, but the air between them thrummed with electricity. Lamps cast soft pools of light over canvases, brushes, and the faint dust of pigment. Maeve stood with her back to Emanuela, painting softly, but she no longer felt the need to hide her awareness of the woman behind her. Emanuela's hands found her shoulders, sliding down her arms in a slow, reverent sweep. Maeve shivered, the brush faltering in her hand, and set it aside. The moment had come, the one they had been circling for weeks, months, since that first brush of admiration, since the hidden painting had been unveiled. "You don't have to hold back," Emanuela whispered, voice low, deliberate, almost a caress in itself. Maeve turned, and in the soft lamplight, their eyes met. Everything hung between them, the unspoken desire, the long-held fascination, the recognition of each other in ways no one else ever could. Slowly, deliberately, Emanuela stepped closer. Her hands cupped Maeve's face, fingers tracing the lines, memorizing, revering, claiming without force. Maeve's hands found Emanuela's waist, pressing her body close, feeling the warmth, the heartbeat, the steady rhythm of desire. The first kiss was slow, almost ceremonial, a meeting of lips that spoke of every stolen glance, every touch withheld, every longing kept secret. Their mouths moved in harmony, a conversation of need and reverence, tentative at first, then urgent, hungry, searching. Hands roamed with intent but reverence, tracing collars, shoulders, the curve of the back, the softness of hair. Maeve's fingertips grazed Emanuela's neck, sliding down to the small of her back, eliciting a shiver that echoed through the space between them. Emanuela's lips traveled to Maeve's jaw, her hands sliding into her hair, fingers tangling in the strands as if she were trying to anchor herself in the intensity of the moment. Maeve's hands explored, mapping, memorizing, as though she could paint every contour of the woman who had consumed her thoughts for so long. They moved together in slow, deliberate intimacy, breaths mingling, hearts racing, fingers entwined, bodies pressing closer with the perfect balance of desire and reverence. Every touch was a question, every sigh an answer, every kiss a promise and a confession all at once. Time fractured. Minutes, hours, it no longer mattered. Only the rhythm of two bodies discovering each other, learning the sacred geometry of closeness, surrendering to the heat that had been simmering since their first meeting. Maeve pressed her forehead to Emanuela's, breathless, shivering, and whispered, "I've wanted you, since the beginning." Emanuela's hands cupped Maeve's face, thumbs brushing tears she didn't realize had formed. "And I you," she murmured. "Every moment. Every day." The crescendo continued, soft, tender, and consuming. It was a surrender neither had expected, yet both had been yearning for. The studio, the canvases, the hidden painting, all witnesses to a devotion that was intimate, reverent, and entirely theirs. When they finally pulled back, just enough to breathe, the heat lingered between them, thick and sweet, a tangible reminder of the shared intensity. Maeve rested her hand on Emanuela's chest, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath her fingers, and knew that whatever came next, they had crossed into a space where art and passion, trust and desire could coexist perfectly, profoundly, eternally. Chapter 23. The First Night. The studio had been emptied of the day's light, leaving only the golden glow of lamps and the faint shimmer of the city beyond the window. Maeve and Emanuela stood in silence, the hum of their heartbeats louder than anything else. Every brushstroke, every canvas, every shared glance of the past weeks had led them here. Maeve's hands trembled slightly as she reached for Emanuela, tracing the line of her jaw, the slope of her neck, memorizing, revering. Emanuela responded in kind, hands resting against Maeve's back, anchoring her, drawing her closer until the distance that had always separated them vanished. Their lips met first in a slow, deliberate kiss, soft and questioning, yet infused with the heat of weeks of suppressed longing. Maeve's hands slid to Emanuela's waist, pulling her into the gentle curve of her body. Emanuela's fingers tangled in Maeve's hair, fingertips brushing along the nape of her neck, memorizing the softness, the warmth, the tremor of desire. They moved together in the quiet rhythm of discovery, every touch an unspoken question, every sigh a whispered answer. Maeve traced the curve of Emanuela's shoulders, her spine, the hollow behind her ear, as if committing each detail to memory. Emanuela's hands wandered reverently over Maeve's back, pressing her close, drawing the heat from her core into their shared embrace. Clothing became a gentle surrender, slow, careful, deliberate. Fingers traced the line of exposed skin, mapping, memorizing, worshipping the curves and planes of each other. The world outside ceased to exist. There were no galleries, no accolades, no obligations, only the sacred intimacy they had cultivated through glances, gestures, and unspoken confessions. Maeve whispered against Emanuela's lips, "I've wanted you," for so long, and the words were a prayer, a confession, a promise. Emanuela's response was a low, reverent hum, her hands and lips exploring the terrain of Maeve's body with the same care and devotion she had once reserved for canvases and brushstrokes. Every touch was deliberate, every movement slow, ritualistic, designed to savor rather than rush, to honor rather than consume. They sank onto the plush carpeted floor near the easel, wrapped around each other, the heat between them growing, tempered by the reverence they had cultivated. Every kiss, every gentle caress, every shiver elicited a response that was both tender and urgent, a conversation of bodies, hearts, and souls. Time fractured, minutes became hours, hours became timeless. Breath mingled with breath, heartbeats synced, and whispers of names and promises filled the quiet space. Maeve's fingers traced constellations along Emanuela's spine. Emanuela's lips followed every curve of Maeve's shoulders and neck, reverently, worshipfully. And when they finally collapsed together, bodies entwined, the heat spent but the connection profound, Maeve rested her head against Emanuela's chest, listening to the steady pulse of her heart. Emanuela's hand stroked her hair gently, a silent promise, a quiet affirmation of devotion, trust, and awe. In that night, they had crossed the boundary from longing to union, from reverence to surrender. It was not just passion, it was sacred, it was intimate, it was transformative. And in the quiet aftermath, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, the world could wait. For Maeve and Emanuela, this night belonged only to them, a perfect blend of desire, trust, and profound connection, the first of many in a dance that would never lose its reverence. Chapter 24, Morning After. Sunlight filtered softly through the gauzy curtains, spilling across the studio in gentle, golden slants. The room smelled faintly of paint, perfume, and the warmth of bodies pressed close through the night. Maeve stirred first, eyelids fluttering open to find Emanuela still lying beside her, a faint smile curving her lips even in sleep. For a long moment, Maeve just watched the rise and fall of her chest, the way a lock of hair fell across her face, the soft way her hands rested, relaxed. A quiet awe filled her. This was the woman who had fascinated her from the beginning, now intimate, tender, vulnerable, and fully present. Emanuela stirred, eyelids opening slowly, eyes meeting Maeve's. A soft laugh, barely more than a whisper, escaped her lips. "Morning," she murmured, voice husky, low, intimate. Maeve's fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Morning," she replied, leaning forward just enough to press a gentle kiss to her temple, then tracing her jaw with light, reverent touches. For a while, they stayed like that, close, entwined, savoring the quiet aftermath. Fingers brushed fingers, shoulders pressed together, noses touched, light kisses lingering in the corners of mouths. There was no rush, no urgency, only the comfort and electricity of proximity. "I can't believe we finally," Maeve's voice trailed off, lips brushing Emanuela's earlobe as she spoke. Emanuela shifted slightly, tilting her head, her lips meeting Maeve's in a soft, lingering kiss. "I've wanted it, every moment since the beginning," she said, breath mingling with Maeve's, warmth and promise flowing between them. They laughed softly, playful, teasing, fingers tracing the lines of backs and arms, hands finding small, intimate places, wrists, knuckles, the gentle curve of a shoulder. The intimacy of the night was no longer just physical. It had seeped into every glance, every touch, every shared breath. Maeve stretched lazily, resting her head against Emanuela's chest, listening to the slow, steady beat of her heart. "I could stay like this forever," she whispered. Emanuela's fingers stroked her hair in small, deliberate circles. "Then stay," she said softly, voice low, intimate, almost a prayer. "No one's going anywhere." They spent the morning like that, soft kisses, gentle caresses, laughter spilling into the studio like sunlight. Occasionally, Maeve would glance at a canvas or brush and smile, a reminder that art, desire, and devotion were intertwined in ways that made the world feel full, alive, and sacred. When they finally moved to make breakfast, it was a slow, playful affair. Maeve's fingers brushed Emanuela's as she poured coffee, Emanuela teasing her with a soft hum when Maeve dared to steal a kiss mid-motion. Every gesture, every look, every touch was charged with reverence and desire, the intensity of the night tempered by the tenderness of morning. And in that quiet, golden-lit studio, Maeve realized something profound. Intimacy was not just about passion, nor was it only about trust. It was the small, shared moments, the laughter, the whispered confessions, the soft warmth of another soul close enough to feel. For Maeve and Emanuela, this morning after was more than a continuation, it was a promise. A promise that their closeness, their desire, their reverence for each other would deepen, grow, and remain sacred in ways the world outside could never touch. Chapter 25: Life in the Colors Between. The studio was alive with sunlight and soft music, the faint hum of the city drifting through open windows. Maeve stood at her easel, paintbrush in hand, a new canvas coming to life under her deliberate strokes. Behind her, Emanuela moved with quiet grace, arranging brushes, straightening frames, making coffee for the two of them. Every small gesture was intimate, hands brushing over the same surface, a shoulder touching Maeve's as she leaned to adjust a palette. A soft smile exchanged across the room. "May, do you need more red?" Emanuela asked, voice low, careful not to break Maeve's concentration. Maeve glanced over her shoulder, a playful glint in her eyes. "Maybe, if you're offering." The words were light, teasing, but the tension in the air was thick, like sunlight caught in dust motes. Emanuela handed her the tube of paint, their fingers brushing briefly, and the spark lingered long after. Maeve felt it like a pulse, the quiet, steady heat of intimacy threading through the mundane act. Breakfast became a ritual of closeness. They moved around the kitchen, bodies brushing, hands grazing, fingers intertwining occasionally, laughter spilling over the sound of clinking cups and sizzling eggs. Even in these simple moments, the reverence of the night before lingered, a slow burn beneath smiles and glances. Maeve painted for hours, Emanuela watching, sometimes quietly, sometimes leaning close enough to whisper encouragements, soft critiques, or just her presence. Their hands found each other's during breaks, fingers tracing lines of wrists, palms, the backs of hands, small touches that reminded them both that desire and devotion could live in the everyday. When the day stretched long and golden, they would take breaks in the balcony, coffee in hand, leaning together against the railing. Maeve's head resting against Emanuela's shoulder, Emanuela's arm draped lazily around her waist. Words were few, laughter and warmth were enough. Evenings became their sanctuary. Maeve often painted late into the night, the studio glowing, music humming low. Emanuela sometimes joined her at the easel, guiding her brush, her hands ghosting over Maeve's, teaching without words, connecting through the intimacy of creation. At times, Maeve would pause, let her brush fall, and lean into a kiss, soft, reverent, playful, electric. The city outside never intruded. Their world was a small orbit, paint, laughter, whispered confessions, hands entwined, stolen touches on the stairs, gentle sighs in the bathroom mirror as they brushed teeth side by side. Even the mundane, the folding of laundry, the setting of the table, the quiet reading together on the balcony, was charged with a warmth that could not be manufactured. Every morning, Maeve woke to the soft weight of Emanuela beside her, fingers tracing constellations along her back, lips brushing her shoulder in greeting. Every night, they returned to the studio or the bed or the balcony, weaving their closeness into the spaces of life, into the art that had brought them together. Even the hidden painting, the one that first ignited their connection, remained a silent witness in the corner of the studio, its presence a quiet reminder that their intimacy was not fleeting, it was a living, breathing part of their shared world, as natural and essential as light on canvas. Life with Emanuela was no longer just about stolen glances or tentative touches. It was a rhythm, a pulse, a seamless blend of creation and connection. And in the quiet, steady intimacy of daily life, Maeve discovered a new truth: love and desire, reverence and playfulness could thrive not just in the extraordinary, but in every brushstroke, every smile, every lingering touch of the ordinary. Epilogue: The Colors of Love and Legacy. The galleries in Thessaloniki, Athens, and Montreal buzzed with whispers of Maeve Arabella McCrae, the artist whose work seemed to pulse with life. Every painting spoke of quiet intimacy, raw vulnerability, and a daring honesty that left viewers breathless. Critics hailed her as revolutionary, yet the magic behind her art was invisible to the world, the steady, reverent presence of Emanuela Procopia. Maeve stood in her studio, sunlight spilling across the floor, brushes strewn across palettes. She held a fresh canvas, strokes still wet, alive with the tension of creation. Emanuela leaned against the doorway, watching her with the same awe that had drawn Maeve to her months ago, but now softened with the comfort of intimacy, trust, and the unspoken rhythm of shared lives. "May, you've outdone yourself again," Emanuela murmured, voice low, reverent, almost possessive, not of the art, but of the connection that birthed it. Maeve's lips curved in a soft smile, her eyes lighting up as she put down the brush. I think you make me brave," she admitted. Brave to feel it, to show it, to paint it. Emanuela stepped closer, fingers brushing Maeve's cheek, tracing a path of reverence and familiarity. "I didn't make you brave," she whispered. "I just let you see that you already were. That you always were. You just needed permission to believe it." The intimacy they had cultivated, the slow mornings, the ritualistic touches, the playful closeness, the sacred nights, had seeped into every stroke of Maeve's brush. Her colors grew bolder, her textures more daring, her portraits alive with the heartbeat of real human emotion. Lovers, friends, strangers, even the forgotten, they breathed on her canvases because she had learned to feel, to surrender, and to trust. Visitors to her exhibitions often paused before her work, captivated by the life, the vulnerability, the quiet fire in the canvases. Some whispered about the artist's soul laid bare, others marveled at the authenticity that seemed to flow effortlessly from brush to canvas. But no one could know the truth behind it, that each piece was threaded with reverence for one woman, one touch, one presence that had reshaped Maeve's world. And there, in the quiet of her studio, Maeve and Emanuela moved together with the ease of shared lives, their intimacy woven into the ordinary, their devotion into the extraordinary. Fingers brushed over paint-stained hands, laughter echoed against the walls lined with canvases, kisses lingered above palettes, whispers of affection mingled with the scent of oil and pigment. A letter arrived one afternoon from a prestigious Paris gallery, requesting a private exhibition of her new series. Maeve smiled softly, folding it carefully, knowing Emanuela would be beside her as always. "Shall we?" she asked, eyes gleaming with excitement and quiet mischief. Emanuela's hand found hers immediately, fingers curling into a perfect fit. "Always," she replied. In the months and years that followed, Maeve's art traveled the world, Thessaloniki, Paris, Montreal, New York, but no matter where her paintings went, the heart behind them remained constant, anchored in the intimacy, reverence, and love she shared with Emanuela. And through it all, their connection deepened. They were partners, muses, lovers, confidants, their closeness both sanctuary and inspiration. Maeve's hidden painting, once a silent witness to their first encounter, now hung in the private collection of their shared home, a reminder that art and love could not only coexist, they could ignite, transform, and endure. Every brushstroke, every color, every shadow carried a trace of their devotion. And in every gallery, every exhibition, every whispered compliment, Maeve and Emanuela knew the truth. Their love had made the art immortal, and the art had made their love eternal. The world had witnessed Maeve's genius, but it was in the quiet, sacred intimacy of their shared lives that it had truly been born. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.